So again, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this webinar on unlocking the door to sustainable, affordable housing, a Kenyan perspective. So I'm Azmina Banji, and I am the chair of the Kenya Green Building Society. My background is mostly real estate development, but I am currently the general manager for sustainability for PDM Services Limited. I'm also a certified energy manager, a civil engineer, a lawyer, and an expert in greening buildings, both with LEED and EDGE, IFC EDGE. So that's my background. I'm going to just, before I introduce the rest of the panel, I just want to give you some background information, and then I'll go through the bios of each of the panelists, and then we'll dive right into the questions. So last year was a big year for KGBS. The built environment became a key topic in the climate conversation, largely due to the efforts of the Kenya Green Building Society, both in Kenya and across Africa, as Kenya is the chair of the African Regional Network of Green Building Councils. So this conversation it culminated in, our participation in the Africa Climate Summit in September of last year, where KGBS and other ARN members, participated in and led some side events related to the built environment, to topics such as low carbon cities and decarbonization. And then following that, we also carried that same momentum to COP28. Where KGBS again participated in and led several events around the built environment. This year, we're taking that momentum and now evolving the climate conversation to include affordable housing because of the extreme demand for housing in Kenya and in Africa and across Africa. Africa is a very rapidly growing continent, Kenya included, and 80% of the buildings in Africa are yet to be built. We also have a very young population. The average age is 19 across Africa and 17 in Kenya, apparently. I just learned that from Governor Sakaja yesterday when he mentioned the average age of Kenyans. Both rapid urbanization, we're urbanizing at a rate of like 4.2% per year. So rapid urbanization and combined with extreme climate is driving a huge migration into cities. And with that, a growing demand for housing. We currently, in 2017, we had a housing deficit of about 2 million. And that was projected to grow at 150,000 a year. So we need 200,000 homes a year, and we're only able to deliver 50,000. So that deficit's continuing to grow. So it is a significant problem. And coupled with that, we need to drive that housing to be dignified and sustainable. So hence this webinar, to have this discussion with some experts on where we are and how do we get to where we need to go, right? So let me just introduce our guests and give you their brief bios. We have on our panel Graham Reed. He is the CEO of Tilisi Developments and brings a wealth of experience in master plan city development. And he's played a leadership role in shaping Tilisi's urban planning and legal structuring efforts since 2015, and solidifying Tilisi's position as one of Kenya's premier, if not the premier, development firm. So welcome, Graham. We have Stella Mutai, who is the head of mortgage business at Housing Finance Corporation. Stella has over 15 years of experience in real estate lending, mortgage product development and management, green financing, market communication, sales and marketing in local, regional, and diaspora markets. She is responsible for building a profitable mortgage and commercial property book at HFC, and also offers best solutions in the market for corporate, retail, and business banking customers. We then have Lydia O'War. She is currently a partner at KT Law Firm, which is affiliated with Cliff, Decker, and Hoffmeyer, where she leads the real estate practice group. She's a highly experienced advocate and specializes in conveyancing, property law, and securities documentation. Lydia holds a Master's of Law and a diploma in law and a Bachelor's of Law, my goodness, from the University of Nairobi. She's currently, I mentioned her partner and her partnership at the law firm, and she has a reputation as a trusted legal advisor and thought leader in the real estate community. We were also expecting the Director of Housing, Mr. James Mina from the State Department of Housing and Urban Development. However, he was unable to make it, and Mr. Omuku Mongare, who is a senior housing officer at the at the State Housing and Urban Development Department, will be joining us if he hasn't already. I'm sorry, I can't see if he's here yet. But he will be joining us as well. And he is a very experienced electrical engineer and a licensed drone pilot. First time I'm meeting one of those, with a background in building services, and he's highly specialized in preliminary electrical supply and distribution design, as well as drafting contracts for those kind of design efforts, and project management and monitoring and evaluation. So welcome all of you, and we'll just, now that I've already given the introduction and the bios of the guests, let's just jump immediately to the questions. So I'll start with you, Graham. How are developers contributing in making housing more affordable without compromising quality?
Thank you, and thanks for having me on this panel. And it's, as you mentioned, with the urbanization rate, what it is, the number of young people we have, this demand for affordable housing is just going to grow exponentially. And I don't think that we have yet adequate responses. So what I thought before trying to just put out some ideas around that is just to also add a bit to the context that in which we talk about affordable housing. So and I've relied quite heavily on research by the Center for Affordable Housing Finance in Africa. Between 2009 and 2019, there were 158,000 new urban renter households. Only 39,000 new owner-occupied households, and that's per annum, not 158,000, 158,000 per annum. So the question really arises is who's delivering all this stock? And the reality of the matter, when you look at the median household income of 26,000 shillings per month, people are spending around about 9% of their expenditure goes to rental. So that's about 2,840. And I think very often in the discussion about affordable housing, we don't pay enough attention to rental accommodation, affordable rental accommodation. And we haven't yet come up, and it's not in Kenya, in South Africa, a third of household deliveries in backyard shacks. We haven't actually come up with a solution as to how to address and support those micro developers. And many of the things that they're developing are being developed in informal areas with non-durable materials. So it's a question of materials and how one can support those micro developers. But if we're looking at more formal affordable housing, excuse me, you're getting to a situation where a 20 square meter studio is probably going to sell for around between 2 and 2.1 million is probably a good average price, and you're getting, say, a net rental of 15,000. It's giving you a 9% initial yield, and that's very good in the residential market in Kenya if you can achieve those kinds of yields. Obviously, that doesn't factor into account vacancies and so on, but it's still a good yield. So for formal developers who are developing and then selling, mostly to investors who are then renting, there's certainly an attractive proposition for developers, but there are ways that we could make it even more attractive, I think. One of them relates to the planning environment. I think when we're talking affordable housing, we can't be applying parking ratios that are appropriate for a middle income development apartment block. Our parking ratios need to match the demographic and the profile that you're targeting in those affordable developments, and parking is hugely expensive. So that really sort of crunches the numbers because of the amount of money that's going into parking. So I think that there's work to be done with planning departments looking at specific planning regimes for affordable housing. Okay, and also we know that we're moving away from the motor car, and this demographic is not necessarily anyway going to, while they're in affordable housing, own motor vehicles. And then the second area where I think planning regimes need to be reviewed is around setbacks. So if you're having 9-meter setbacks or 6-meter setbacks on roads, first of all, it doesn't create necessarily a desirable built environment that encourages walkability, but you're giving up very valuable land. And that again means that you're not getting the kinds of densities that you want. From a developer's point of view, I really think that we haven't spent enough time looking at construction techniques, materials that would both reduce the amount of embedded energy and speed up the construction process, which is critical if we're talking about affordable rental.
Agreed. And I think, oh, sorry, are you done? Please continue if you still have more to say.
No, I'm done.
Yeah, so I think you're right. And in fact, this is something I have noted earlier too, is that we seem to overlook the fact that currently 90% of people rent, right? And I know the government wants to enable ownership, but developers are still faced with a situation where, you know, when they develop, there's no offtake because most people can't afford to buy, right? And so, you know, there is that transition period, I suppose, where we need to figure out, you know, the off-taker, the investor off-taker that's then going to be able to rent and manage those properties, or however they're going to do it, or schemes like rent to own, which have been discussed in the past. So yeah, correct. And I think when you talk about, you know, the parking ratio, you're right. Also setbacks, but sustainability elements come into this as well, right? So, I mean, non-motorized transport, walking paths, something that we need to encourage the government to include as part of their infrastructure development if you're going to be developing very densely on site. So thank you, Graham. So I'll move to Stella next. And Stella, my first question to you is, what financial instruments or models have proven successful in supporting affordable housing projects in Kenya?
Thank you very much, Azmina, and good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and hello to my fellow panelists. Thank you for inviting me to this panel discussion on unlocking the door to affordable homes and setting a perspective on how we look like in Kenya. Looking at Kenya, we see the genesis of where we came from with affordable housing, and this was launched by the previous regime as part of the Big Four agenda. And this was basically it was necessitated by the need for urbanization, which has increased, as well as a population that is growing at a rate of 2% on an annual basis. So it has been estimated by World Bank that by 2030, we'll need like 300 million houses in the world. That is affordable housing in the world. And so with this now, the governments are running behind and see how do we house the growing population. If at all the population is growing at 2% and there's urbanization at 4%, how do we house these people? And looking back to the equation that looking at what instruments or models have been proven successful in supporting affordable housing in Kenya, we may look at both two sides. We may look at the demand side as well as the supply side. It's very critical to look at the two sides because we'll be looking at, yes, Graham is going to develop properties, but do we have demand? And I can confirm, yes, looking at Kenya, there's a very high demand, and you find that Kenyans are demanding properties below 10 million. And that's why now we have the Kenya Mortgage Refinance coming in to be able to support primary mortgage lenders, that's the financiers like HFC, to be able to finance customers who want to be able to buy properties under the affordable housing at a single digit rate. So some of the instruments under the supply side that have been tested and have been worked very well, we have project financing. And this is where now the financial institutions like HFC are able to finance developers who want to be able to construct properties. So one will be required either to be able to have some equity contribution as well as be able to have some properties like land, and now the financial institution will be able to come in and be able to finance the developer. Then also we have JV or joint ventures. It has been proven to be very successful. Instances whereby a developer is able to come in with the land, or the landowner is able to come in with the land, and the financial institutions comes in with the money. And where the money is not enough, they can be able to look at other investments, or whether we can be able to get in some investors. So from JV, also we have also what is very close to JV is whereby now private equities are able to put in money to developments, and we've seen some PE firms or private equity firms coming in, and they pump in money to some projects, and all this is now aimed at ensuring their supply. In the past, we've stopped that, said that there is no supply in the market, but now we have seen supply coming in the market, and so which makes it very easy now for financial institutions to be able to finance customers who are looking for these properties. There are other ways whereby which have been proven in affordable housing on the supply side, which have been proven to be very successful. And one of them is REITs. REITs is underrated. That's real estate investment trusts. It seems to be underrated, but it's something that is needs to be adopted in Kenya because it's cash that can be able to be injected in. We have developers who are put in money, and they've been able to reap in the benefits of REITs. We have two different types of REITs. We have the development REITs as well as the income REITs, and the development REIT is more suitable for developers who wants to be able now to be able to develop properties under affordable housing. And then also we have issuance of bonds, and noting that now we are talking about Kenya Green Building Society, we have the green bonds that can be able to be issued, and all these, the green bonds now will be now channeled to be able to develop sustainable developments, and all this is to ensure that we are in line with the climatic conditions of what we're being pushed, where we are as a country or as a world. And finally, there's a new model that will be coming up, and this is more or less like the blockchain development, and it's more or less on tokenization. And we have PE firms or private equity firms who are able to put in money to be able to support developers. And out of all these, they're able to inject capital of up to 80%, while the landowner puts in like 20%.
Right.
That's more under supply. And well, under the demand side, we have what has been proven to be very successful. We have whereby we have mortgages, which can be advanced to customers to be able to buy houses once now the developers have been able to put up constructions or projects. And then we also have tenant purchase. It has been proven to be very successful in property ownership, though it has its own pros and cons, as well as rent to own and incremental housing. Housing. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, no, it's very encouraging that there's all these different mechanisms we're looking at. I think the blockchain is a very encouraging technology that's emerging that could, actually give us some opportunity to even do some grassroots investment in affordable housing. The REITs programs, of course, which also the Kenya Property Developers Association has been advocating very strongly, are a good opportunity for developers and, again, the people who want to, the people on the ground who want to invest in real estate, right? And it's good to hear that the supply is also increasing. Thank you, Stella. Let me go to Lydia next. Ian from the State Department of Housing and Urban Development is also on line now, but let me finish with Lydia and then I will come to you, Ian. And so Lydia, let me ask you, you're like a specialist in one of the areas that I think despite all the reform that the government has tried to do through legislation, the Sectional Properties Act still remains a mystery to almost everyone. So if you could please, Lydia, give us a concise overview of sectional titles, emphasizing the basic principles of sectional ownership and its significance to not only the Kenyan context, but why does it matter to the affordable housing program?
Thank you so much. And first, let me start by congratulating the Kenya Green Building Society for the good work that you've done and for creating visibility on sustainable issues in Kenya. We are watching and we are following, so thank you for that. So to your question, when it comes to sectional titles, there is so much to unpack, but obviously because of time limitation, I will only provide a brief summary, mainly sharing information based on where we want this conversation to go. So prior to conceptualization of sectional titles, the predominant land ownership model constituted what I would like to refer to as sole ownership structures or arrangements, where individuals or entities owned entire parcels of land without subdivision into separate sections or units, right? However, with time, there was increased pressure on available land due to urbanization and population growth. I think Stella mentioned that. And this led to a change in dynamics in the sense that there was a need to come up with a practical solution for maximizing land use in urban areas by one, facilitating efficient use of limited urban space, and two, promoting high density housing. So given this, you can see that the traditional model of land ownership became impractical in urban areas. So sectional titles then emerged as a response to these changing dynamics, aiming to cater to a growing population and to provide a legal structure that accommodates the realities of urban living, which is allowing for subdivision of a single property into individual units, right? So this legal arrangement is often used in multi-housing developments, including apartments and townhouses. And let me emphasize, I'm emphasizing on townhouses because when there was a drive to implement the Sectional Properties Act 2020, there was a robust debate on whether this legal framework applies on a vertical scale, so going up, or whether it also applies on a horizontal scale, right? And the answer to the latter is that this framework does apply to units on a horizontal scale, such as townhouses in a larger development. Now, I'm sure that at this point, one would ask why we need this concept of sectional units, through the Sectional Properties Act, yet we had a system that worked through registration of subleases. Actually, I know a client who calls her sublease that book because it's about 60 pages of a document that is drafted by a lawyer, signed by the parties, stamped with duty, and then presented at the land registry for registration against the parent title or the mother title. In practice, we call this the long-term lease regime or sale by way of long-term leases. Now, to answer that question, I would need to first lay the foundation by providing you with a rundown on the history of land regimes in Kenya, especially in relation to the system of title, and then what was the ultimate intention of the Sectional Properties Act. So of course, we can't cover that in this session, but the long and short of it is that, and also tying to the significance of sectional titles in the Kenyan context, is that our innovativeness resulted in the long-term lease regime, right? However, the system does not provide for subdivision of a single parcel of land into individually owned units. Under the sectional titles regime, the land is actually subdivided through a sectional plan, which actually acts the same way as the subdivision plans that we know do, right? So in this regime, the land is actually subdivided through a sectional plan to allow individual ownership of units within the property with a shared ownership of common areas, right? And this these shares in the common property are actually defined and indicated on each unit title. So there's also the matter of georeferencing. Remember, I'm answering the question why we needed the sectional units, yet there's a presumption that we had a system that worked through the long-term leases. So there's also the matter of georeferencing, which essentially is a build survey carried out by a licensed surveyor. And georeferencing defines the boundaries of each individual unit. This concept of georeferencing is now a precondition for multi units and a complete departure from the architectural plans which applied previously. Yeah. So in terms of I think that would be a concise overview of the sectional titles. Asme, I think you're muted.
So in essence, kind of similar to the condominium schemes, right? Where the unit owner actually owns a share of the land, the underlying land, as well as, like you said, any common areas in the building, right? And they have their own title, as opposed to a sublease where something could revert to the original landowner at some point in time.
That's correct.
Right.
That principle applies, yes.
Yeah, great. Thank you. Thank you for that very comprehensive answer. So before we move on to Ian, what I'd like to do is, because we've got our audience, our audience needs to start thinking about questions they might have, because we're going to reserve 10 minutes for questions and answers at the end of the session. So please, if there are any questions, if you could post them, that would be great. If not, just put your hand up at the end and we'll see if we can get to them if time permits. Thank you. So Ian, could you, are you there? Can you just acknowledge that you're here?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Great. So Ian, I already introduced you before you joined. So I'm just going to ask you your first question, okay? Basically, the first question here is, what are the key priorities and strategies of the government in promoting affordable housing?
Thank you so much. And first, I'd like to apologize for coming in late, and as well as to thank the KGBS for providing us with this particular forum to discuss issues of housing that is at the core of this government's agenda. So on the issue of the key priorities of the government and the State Department, first of all, approximately 34% of the Kenyan urban population, approximately 34% of our population is in our urban areas, and 70% of that particular population live in the slums. So the main and the key priority of the State Department, first of all, is to provide and facilitate access to decent and affordable housing. That is one. And two, while we're at it, we are looking at providing job creation to the general population in the country.
Great. Yeah. So, as a follow-up to that, there's statistics out there that building housing, affordable or otherwise, creates 5 direct jobs and 8 indirect jobs. So that's 13 jobs per unit, which is fairly significant, because if our target is to deliver 200,000 units a year, we're creating like 2.6 million jobs a year. It's contributing to the economy, skills development, hopefully, in green and sustainable housing. So it's a wonderful program. So let me go back to Graham. And Graham, let me ask you, What are you've already touched on parking and setbacks, but what are the other challenges that developers are facing in navigating the current legal and regulatory landscape for affordable housing projects? I think you're on mute, Graham.
Sorry, I'm doing like you did. One of the things that everybody will raise is the approval process. So, and the costs of approvals. All right, so there's various layers of approvals, but the one where you're experiencing, or we're experiencing the most delays, is normally at the county government. And they've got a lot of work and that sort of thing, but the process can cause delays, and that every delay has financial implications for the developer, and of course those costs then get passed on to the ultimate renter or homeowner. So that, I think that's probably one of the the long and complex processes. But I think another thing, and I think to some extent in government's program this has been addressed, and we always like to say at Tilisi, we're also addressing it, is the costs of infrastructure. So if you're developing and there's no municipal water, or there's limited municipal water, so you have to put in large amounts of storage and boreholes and whatever, that just increases the costs quite phenomenally. And then the lack of waterborne sewerage and that sort of thing, which is part of the reason why Tilisi did what it did. You buy the land and you've got your power, your water, your sewer, ICT connections. But most affordable housing developments are not happening there. And you're seeing a situation where you're having to put that in if you're going to offer a decent quality of life. So you end up, and I keep saying it's an externalization of costs by government, because those are legitimately costs that county government as a local authority should be bearing. If we don't, for whatever reasons, and there's lots, I'm sure, history that explains that, but if we're not spending on that, then the individual homeowner is carrying that particular cost. And I think that's one of the largest costs. So if you combine the sort of bureaucratic delays together with the externalization of infrastructure costs to individual developers and then individual homeowners, that's a problem. And I know I know the government housing programs, I think Ian will probably talk about it, particularly in the low cost. The government is picking up some of those costs. But I think there's work to be done. If we want to start speeding up the rate of housing delivery at an affordable level, then we certainly need to be addressing the infrastructure issues quite rapidly. And that's my 2 points.
Asmina, you're muted.
You're also muted.
Oh dear. Okay. Yeah, you're absolutely right. In fact, I remember I've been on the KEPSA land sector and housing and urban development board for forever. And when even the first affordable housing program iteration was released, like 5, 6, 7 years ago, that was I put my developer's hat on, and that was one of the biggest challenges we had, was the delivery of infrastructure. And how does a developer, produce affordable housing if the government isn't going to participate in a timely manner to develop infrastructure to the site, right? They may give you free land, but then the cost of infrastructure just makes projects not viable. So thank you, Graham, for that contribution. Let me go back to Ian again. And Ian, your next question is, how does the government plan to collaborate with private stakeholders to achieve affordable housing goals? You've just heard one of the biggest challenges that developers have delivering affordable housing. So please.
Thank you so much, Asmina. So the private sector plays a critical role when it comes to the implementation of affordable housing. And this also plugs into the key strategies that as a department we are putting in place to implement this program. And as you have rightly put, we have a plan of implementing 200,000 units annually, and this provides a myriad of opportunities and jobs to the people of Kenya. We in the implementation process, there, as you put it, we have approximately 5 direct jobs and 8 indirect jobs that are being created when it comes to this program, and these opportunities cut across to manufacturing, especially when it comes to the materials that are being used in the affordable housing projects across the country, as well as the transport sector, where we have these materials transported to site, as well as the individuals that are undertaking these works. And therefore, as part of the partnership that we have with the private sector, first of all, we have discussions that are ongoing when it comes to the implementation of sustainable projects. One, with the manufacturing sector, to ensure that other than providing these materials, we also make sure that the materials production is sustainable, as well as hello, can you hear me? Hello.
Sorry,
Yeah,
it was on mute again.
We can hear
Yes,
you.
we can hear
We
you
can hear you.
clearly.
Oh, okay. Thank you so much. So we've had previously engagements with the private sector, especially in manufacturing, as well as community involvements through public participations, to ensure that this program is in line with the expectations of the private sector, as well as the general public.
Great, thank you. Yeah, and also civil society, because KGBS actively participated in the last stakeholder participation event on January 30th, pushing, of course, our agenda to make sure that the government will promote sustainable and green, and hopefully green certified affordable housing. And we're there to give you our 100% support as far as, enabling that environment of achieving green certification for affordable housing. So thanks, Ian. Stella, let me come back.
Absolutely.
Sorry. Were you saying something, Ian?
No, I wanted to completely agree with you, and also to know that as a State Department, we've made significant steps when it comes to ensuring that HP projects are sustainable, and we also implement green buildings. And as one of our major successes has been in the Homa Bay Affordable Housing Project, which has, so far as you're aware, received an EDGE certification by IFC.
Yes. Yeah, that's excellent. We're very happy to be able to collaborate and to have the national government, support the programs. So let me, that's really exciting for us. And I know that even NHC green certified the affordable housing in Homa Bay, so we know we can do it, and we'll move forward that way. Thank you, Ian. Stella, let me come back to you, and the same question, or similar question to how can financiers collaborate with developers to mitigate risks and ensure the sustainability of affordable housing initiatives?
Thank you, Azmina, for that question, and maybe ask maybe what I can be able to go back is to the question I was able to respond earlier, whereby we're talking about urbanization and the rapidly growing population. So you find that the housing landscape is still evolving, and with these two factors, you find that we are having more people moving into to cities. And initially, we find that the urbanization was in Nairobi, Mombasa, and Kisumu. But with the devolution of the county governments, now you find now there's urbanization now to where we have the 47 counties, which is good. That may ensure that there is circulation of money in those countries. So in the current environment that we are operating in, and achieving equitable and sustainable housing solutions are complex challenge that demands collaborative efforts in between the developer and the financial institutions. And all this can only be able to be achieved through practical ways like symbiotic partnership, whereby we are able to partner with the developers to ensure that we are able either to be able to share the risk. And when we're sharing the risk, we're looking at how do we finance this developer? How do we support this developer to ensure they're able to offload or to offload their development so as they can be able to move to the next development? And this is basically done by financing the end buyers. And that's why you find that now we have the primary mortgage lenders, the financial institutions that are partnered with Kenya Mortgage Finance Company now to be able to finance our customers to be able to buy, or clients to be able to buy properties under the affordable housing. So this is one of the collaborative ways we can be able to partner. One, the symbiotic partnerships. The other one is to financing of the developers, as well as also sharing the risk. One thing, Azmina, that you need to be able to note is that looking at the 2022 CBK report, it showed that the highest non-performing loans are in the real estate sector, contributing an amount of 15%. With this, you've seen that maybe some financial institutions are shying away from financing the developers, and that's why now we'll need that the collaborative way of risk sharing. And this risk sharing can be either 50-50, it can be 60-40, or 30-70. And this ensures that the developer has some skin in the game, and now the financier is able to chip in some of the money to be able to support the development of the projects. And this will end up ensuring that we have sustainable developments in the country.
Thank you, Stella. Yes, and you're right. You know, offtake is always one of the biggest challenges for developers, right? So facilitating offtake through affordable mortgages is one significant way of reducing the risk for the developer, right?
Exactly.
If I'm assured, that I can actually sell these homes, then it's easier for me to move forward with building. So thank you very much. I think with that, we're going to see if anybody has any questions, and then we're going to give every panelist a chance to give their parting shot. And then I'd like our CEO, Nasra, to also give some closing remarks. So if anybody has any questions, please raise your hand. I'm not seeing any questions yet. I'm not seeing any hands raised yet.
There is a question from
okay.
now.
Here. I'm seeing something from Larry.
There's Gideon Murafa, who is asking, how has the increase in government bond rates affected developers in general, seeing that the bonds are yielding more returns than real estate?
Okay, Stella, can I have you take that question?
Yes, I can take that question. Azmina and maybe to Gideon, how the increase in the government bonds affected the developments. One thing that you'll notice that investing in real estate is one of the most expensive investment a customer or anyone will ever be able to make at any given chance. And noting that or what a developer looks at, they look at two things when you are developing a property. What is their return on investments? And once somebody is able to look at their return on investments, despite the bonds going up and also what one wants to be able to construct and the passion maybe somebody has, they'll still be able to progress with that, because all what one needs to be able to do is to ensure that they're able to do their mathematics or their calculations well before they break ground, and they look at what will be their return on investment, what will be their yield once they get into these projects.
Thank you, Stella. Does anybody else have a question? We think we'd have a whole lot of questions on this program.
Actually, Azmina, there are quite a number of questions in the chat. I think you can't see the chat.
Oh, no, I didn't. I was looking for the Q&As. So let me see what's on the chat.
Yeah, and I think there's a hand up from Na. Na, I've already activated your mic in case you want to ask the question.
All right, so if Na could ask her question, or isn't that the one that?
Yeah, hi, it's working now.
Okay.
Brilliant, such engaging conversations. Thank you all to the panelists for this very exciting conversation. I think my question probably to Stella and probably Graham can share some thoughts on it. Hi, my name is Na and I work at REAL as a climate and green buildings lead. Super excited about the green affordable housing space. And I wondered if there's a role or, what's the appetite for guarantees? How can we explore and how have we thought about leveraging guarantees, the value of guarantees to unlock financing, local self-sustaining financing for both, the demand and supply side, but particularly to de-risk the sector for banks to lend to developers working the affordable housing space. And Graham, I think the part B of that question is, what is the role for developers and how can developers and banks alike come to the table to further develop a tangible solution that can potentially be rolled out in Kenya? Thank you.
So Stella, did you want to take that? Any comments on that?
I can comment at maybe at high level and looking at guarantees. And one thing I can be able to comment is that we usually have a category of customers or maybe clients who are termed as very risky. That's maybe mostly customers in the informal sector. And for instance, the instance whereby we're able to have guarantees coming in, we can say that there's risk sharing, security, mortgage guarantee fund that can be availed to be able to support the informal sector. And from this, now we not only support the maybe the people who are termed as maybe the bottom of the pyramid to own properties, as well as for financial institutions, they'll be able to be guaranteed that in terms of risk, showing that there's risk sharing in between the guarantee fund to be able to on lend to this sector. And that maybe we can be able to have a discussion on that and see how the implementation of it can be done based on what is the percentage that is coming in.
Great, thank you, Stella. Nasra, I'm asking if you could please share the questions that are in the chat, because apparently I'm not a member of the chat and I can't see them.
I'm sorry about that, Azmina.
No worries.
I think the next question that it's more of a comment really. Elian says he doesn't get clearly which actions the government has taken to collaborate with developers to enhance sustainable and affordable housing. So I think that's more a question for the representative from the ministry, or rather the State Department, to answer.
So Ian, are you still there? Ian, can you hear us?
And you're on mute.
Ian,
So I think either he's logged off or because I can't find him.
yeah,
But just to give you a high level answer to that question, Elian, I think one of the things that the government is doing is it has an affordable housing development framework, which has started incorporating certain principles around green buildings and sustainability. So currently, I think the will is there in terms of highlighting we'd like to utilize EDGE. These are certain principles we want incorporated into the affordable housing space, but translating the will into action has been, I don't want to say slow, but I think it's not as rapid, in translating it into financing opportunities so far. But I strongly believe that will change, especially since last year we had a number of climate conversations in Kenya, which saw the built environment become a player in climate conversations. So there's going to be a lot more movement in translating principles into legislation and action. And that hopefully will mean we're connecting the dots between projects and finance this year. But yeah, I think for now, that's what I can say.
okay. Thanks, Nasra. So if we could just maybe take a couple more questions in the interest of time. I think we started late, so maybe if you can give us like an extra few minutes for everybody's closing shot after a couple more questions. Does that work? I'm talking to you, Nasra.
Oh, okay. I can give it 10 more minutes.
My boss, the CEO.
I can give you 10 minutes. So there's one
Okay.
question. Okay, so there are two questions, and then you can make your closing remarks. So the first one, are there any grants or financing options for low-cost construction in slums and in rural counties in Kenya, leveraging on ABMTs, Azmina? Hint, hint, in case where individuals have ancestral land but cannot afford to build. The background is the Kenyan retirement homes in rural areas and largely witnessed during festivities when people move up country. So that's the first question, which I think I'll let you perhaps tackle.
Okay. Go ahead, finish what you were saying.
No, before I go to the final question. Yeah.
Okay, so the short answer is no. For those who don't know what ABMT is, it's alternative building or alternative or appropriate building materials and technologies. The Kenya Green Building Society has done a lot of research in this area with support from FSD Kenya. And we've published a report that will be launched imminently on the various ABMTs that would work in Kenya, particularly for affordable housing, and some related costs and stuff. But at this point, I don't know of anyone that is actually going to be offering grants or any kind of subsidies, but it's certainly something that Nasra KGBS should maybe explore with some of the civil society organizations that we're working with that are pushing for sustainable construction materials and specific sustainable construction materials. So I think that's my answer to that question.
Great, thanks, Azmina. And the last one, the State Department of Housing and Urban Development lists a number of alternative building technology and materials as a way to lower housing costs. Why are these same materials not implemented in the affordable housing program? Again, Azmina, I feel like this person's going up your alley. It would go a long way in changing negative perceptions on these materials. For example, interlocking stabilized soil blocks that can be used for high-rise buildings. All right, over to you, Azmina.
Again, my short answer is that if he or she's asking that question, then Nasra, we haven't done our job. Because one of the things that we need to be doing is with our all the ABMT research and everything we've done with our collaborating partners, we really need to now start sensitizing the industry and doing some awareness raising, and even figure out ways to match some funding with some projects to pilot some of these technologies.
Thanks for that, Azmina. I think what's most important, though, and I think what's important to highlight here is we need to do our ABMT report launch, and then we can start sensitizing. So yeah, just to let you know, Larry and Sitene, we did an ABMT report and we finalized the report just around COP28 time. So we are working on launching this report, and then hopefully we can build capacity and awareness, and then now start looking at the bigger picture. So thank you so much for your questions. Over to you, Azmina, if there's anything else.
So one parting shot, please, 1.5 minutes each, if we could, just in the interest of time. Let me start with Graham.
Thanks very much, and thanks for the very interesting conversation. I'm sure it's going to continue. I think just a couple of points. I do think government support needs to look at things like VAT on affordable housing, zero rating it. I know it's been an issue that's been raised for the last 20 years in South Africa, and it's never happened, but it's something I think that can reduce the cost of affordable housing by 16%. There are a whole host of issues around that. And given that most people live in rented accommodation, at least in Nairobi and urban areas, we really need to think about this rental tax, because it's a tax when you might not even be liable for tax. So there needs to be some work there. I think Stella mentioned it. I think that especially for rental housing accommodation, for developers who want to develop rental housing, the use of tokenization is going to be increasingly a very useful financial mechanism. There's work being done in Kenya on it. And there's a outfit in the States called Realty, and in the last 3 years or so, they've tokenized $100 million worth of rental accommodation. And that's a fantastic financing mechanism. And then I'll just talk a little bit about music. Tracy Chapman sang Fast Car at the Grammys. Fast Car was released in 1988. And it's a song about poverty and economic hardship and the struggle of trying to escape the cycle of poverty. And it's still 36 years later, totally relevant to the US. And we really don't have 56 years to be addressing the pressing demand to provide people with proper, decent, sustainable, affordable housing.
Thank you, Graham. Thank you. Those are very, very thought-provoking comments. Appreciate it. Stella?
Thank you, Azmina, and the team at Kenya Green Building Society for this webinar, and I believe we can continue having those discussions. I know there's somebody had commented on the chat in regards to PPPs, that maybe I can be able to comment before I make my final remarks. And I know PPPs are the public-private partnerships. It's something that it's coming up, and the framework has already it's already in existence. And even when you look at the National Treasury, there's a Director General who looks after the public-private partnership, and it's something that it's going to gain momentum, whereby the government provides the land, and now we have either private equity developers coming in to be able to provide finance to be able to develop properties. So that's something also that needs to be adopted more so in Kenya, and it will make it easier to be able to increase the supply in the markets. And to my final remarks, the financial institutions invest in areas that make the greatest contribution, and one of these areas is it's affordable housing due to the increased demand, as well as the contribution by the sector. When you look at real estate, it contributes around 8% to GDP, gross domestic to GDP. And in addition, the financial institutions, they play a very critical role in ensuring that private developers have incentives by participating in affordable housing, and also being playing the advocacy role to the government, whereby they're able to push some of the incentives on behalf of the developers. And all this is aimed at contributing to the Sustainable Development Goals. And this is the Sustainable Development Goal number 11, which is sustainable cities and communities. And it all involves making the cities inclusive, safe, resilient, and sustainable. So for that, I believe financial institutions have a big role to be able to play in affordable housing, noting that we are providing a very emotive product, and this emotive product is it's a home, and all this is we are providing under concessional terms, of which we looking at HFC. That's something that we're doing. We're financing customers at 9.5% for a term of 20 years, and one is able to access a property as long as they are borrowing below. They're borrowing at 8 million. They can be able to access mortgages at 9.5%, 8 million, and for a term of 20 years. I'm looking forward to pushing these conversations further in the year. Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you, Stella. And I love that word, emotive. Very nice. Yeah, looking forward to continuing the conversations. Lydia, some parting words for us?
Thank you so much. And you can be rest assured that after this, I'm going to read more on ABMTs. So on your part, I can say that sensitization has started already. Thank you for that new information that I didn't have. In terms of closing remarks, I'm sure most of you may have listened to, was it a podcast or a conversation in the media regarding, residents of the Kilimani area in Nairobi complaining about, what's happening there. And when I listened to that conversation, what my understanding was, in summary, they were complaining about Kilimani turning into a concrete jungle without allowing for efficient infrastructure. And I think we've spoken on that. And then there was also the element of public participation, which they said we were never consulted. Some papers were passed around, and all that. So what I'd like to say is that in terms of ensuring equitable and sustainable within the sectional title space, I would first of all say, please familiarize yourselves with the Sectional Properties Act, its regulations, and also within your developments, your cooperation bylaws, to ensure that one, there's compliance, and to ensure that you can advocate for sustainable and responsible developments, and also so that you're able to effectively participate in decision-making processes. When these people are carrying out public participation by involving residents in the planning process, do you have sufficient information to participate effectively, right? Having said that, the overall goal, in my view, is to create sustainable, livable, and well-functioning communities. And balancing these goals requires collaboration by all stakeholders, including the city planners, who, through thoughtful urban design and planning, including developers, through, for example, incorporating energy efficient designs, renewable energy sources, waste management systems, etc., policy makers, who, for instance, can prioritize things like public health with an emphasis on air quality, water quality, and the right to light. And of course, the community at large. So for me, information is key in terms of ensuring oversight and compliance. Thank you once again. You're muted, Azmina.
I can't believe this. I keep forgetting to unmute. Yeah, thank you, Lydia. I really appreciate that. And I think you touched on some, the topic of collaboration, which is absolutely, absolutely key. And, we always say we need to collaborate. It's important to have to form these partnerships and networks and stuff. And then sometimes it just doesn't come together, right? And we just, I think, have to make a really concerted effort to be able to do that. Nasra, you turned off your camera, but are you ready to give us some remarks? And before you start, let me say something. For the Kenya Green Building Society, Nasra joined us June of last year. You're on mute now.
You're muted, Nasra.
You're on
Sorry,
mute.
June 2022.
Gosh. Nasra joined us in June of 22, and I just want to say to everyone that's on this webinar that she has been an incredible blessing. What a powerhouse. I mean, a lot of this, positioning of KGBS with the national government, the county governments, the Africa Climate Summit, the 2 COPs back to back, it's all been Nasra. And thank you, Nasra, on behalf of the whole KGBS board, our secretariat, everyone, thank you so much. So can we have your closing remarks?
Wow, Azmina, you're making me blush on camera. But thank you so much. I really appreciate also that both the KGBS board and really the broader KGBS family, including our members and friends, have been so supportive, even trusting my ideas and journey. I mean, Lydia was a friend of mine in my previous life, and I'm glad to be in this space with you today as well, Lydia. So, I mean, it's a step at a time. But on to my closing remarks. I think one of the things I want to say is thank you so much, everyone who joined us today. And thank you to Lydia, to Stella, to Graham. In fact, the first time I interacted with Graham actually was at the pre-ACS when we had the Sustainability in Action tour at Tilisi. It was super cool because everyone that attended the pre-ACS was talking about how cool it was to ride our little e-bikes with EB bikes. And I think for me, one of the things that I really aim to do is to make sustainability something relatable, because I don't think Africa lacks technical expertise. What we struggle with is relational expertise. And until you can get people to understand what it is you're saying in a very simple way, you will find that even if you're doing the right thing, you won't have many people listening into you. So these kind of conversations where we have, a lawyer, a financier, and a developer in this space is mainly for us to listen and connect and share ideas so that we can serve you better as our listener. And for me, I want to, do a shameless plug here, Azmina. It's your session, but I'm going to do it anyway. Yesterday, we handed over to the governor of Nairobi his IFC Edge certificate and plaque. And essentially, it was recognized officially yesterday that the Nairobi governor's office is the first IFC Edge green government office in Africa. So that was pretty cool. Thank you, Grim. And I just want to say what this means is a wave is coming, guys, where the government is now looking for opportunities that translate into solving 2 problems, which are essentially one for Africa: climate and development. And that means in this continent where we're rapidly urbanizing, cities are going to be a platform for change. And the built environment is going to be a key player in driving that change. So housing is not going to be left behind. So when you're thinking about housing, remember, with sustainability in mind, the only way to unlock it is to ensure our housing is, sustainable. What we want to do and what we invite you to do is to help us help you, whether it's to understand the concept of bankability, where Stella is here and she can, give us more information, or if you need us to talk to banks like ABSA, Stanbic, who are members, we'd be more than happy to unlock that for you. We also have our superstar expert lawyers like Lydia, who would be more than happy to explain a lot of the interesting clauses that you and I might struggle with. And that's to say, when we're, transitioning, there'll be lots of moving parts, but together we will make that less scary for you. And last but not least, I really want to appreciate Graham as well. I mean, he's done something fantastic with the 15-minute city concept, and it's something that we're really trying to integrate as KGBS, and we're hoping that this year there'll be a lot of amazing things. Now, I want to do a shameless plug. Real is really, really an entity to watch out for in the affordable housing space, especially when it comes to green and affordable housing. We'll be sharing some exciting news sometime in the next few weeks. So, keep looking out. And last but not least, thank you so much, Azmina, for moderating, for being awesome always. And of course, for making me blush on camera. So thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Nasra.
I'm going to stop there, but I appreciate your time. We will be sharing the recording. And if any of you need to know any information, or if you want to contact any of the panelists, please let me know, and I'll be more than happy to definitely get you in touch. Thank you so much. Have a lovely afternoon. Bye, guys.
Thank you, Nasra. Thank you, everyone, for attending. Have a great afternoon. Bye.